Welcome back to Write, Submit, Succeed, a Nurses Podcast. The podcast designed to help nurses share their knowledge, experiences, and expertise through writing and publication.
I'm Sherry.
And I'm Jules. Today's episode is called Getting Started When You Don't Know Where to Start.
And honestly, that's where most nurse authors might hit roadblocks right away at the beginning. You may have an idea, a project, clinical insight, patient care innovation, but turning that into an article can feel a bit overwhelming.
Yeah, especially when you're balancing working shifts and family responsibilities, leadership roles, graduate school. Finding the time and the confidence to start writing could be one of the biggest barriers.
So today we're going to talk about practical first steps you can take. Even if you have limited time and limited experience or no idea where to begin. There are a few pieces to consider as you get started in writing. Today we are going to briefly cover key areas to help you move to the writing stage more readily.
Hey, Sherry, one of the biggest myths about writing is that you need huge blocks of uninterrupted time.
That's true. You really don't. Most successful nurse authors write in small pieces. So setting a goal of 30 minutes or an hour weekly here and there, maybe putting it on your calendar, is a good place to get started. A rough outline is okay. It doesn't have to be. You're not going to get to your final product until a bit later. So start with a rough outline. Take notes on ideas as you get them, and try and get some pieces down on paper.
Yeah, I think the key is momentum. Writing, it doesn't have to start perfectly. It just has to start.
Exactly. Sometimes the first step is simply opening a document, writing your ideas, and, adding to those ideas before you lose them.
Yeah, or even jotting down bullet points. Things like, what happened? What did you learn? Why does this matter to nurses? That's a big one. And what would you want the reader to take away?
And I think importantly too is to remember that you already have the expertise. Many times nurses often underestimate how valuable their everyday experiences are to their background, making them knowledgeable enough to get started in writing for publication.
That's so true. So if you have solved a clinical problem, improved a workflow, developed patient education, led a quality initiative, or learned something that others could benefit from, you already have the foundation for an article.
Yes. So another place nurses get stuck is trying to figure out where their article belongs.
Yeah, there are many, many different types of nursing journals, and understanding the differences can really help you shape your writing.
Some journals clearly rely heavily on original research studies.
Whereas others, I think, focus on practical, clinical content nurses can immediately apply in practice.
And of course, some do both, so that's where it gets a little trickier.
Yeah, because it's important to understand the difference between research articles and practice-based articles.
Yes, and for example, a formal research study usually has key things that we're all familiar with, like the methodology, data analysis, working through institutional review boards, and more of a structured research reporting.
Yeah, but practical articles may focus more on things like clinical experiences, leadership lessons, educational innovations, case examples or case studies, or quality improvement projects.
And takeaways, as you mentioned already. Yeah. And speaking of that, quality improvement projects are not the same as research studies. here at American Nurse Journal, we do accept quality improvement projects, and we have some guidelines on how to write those.
Yeah, that's an important distinction. QI projects are often designed to improve processes and outcomes within a specific organization, while research is intended to create new knowledge.
Different journals may have different expectations for each type of submission. So understanding those differences early can really save you time in the long run.
Yeah, and another thing to pay attention to is writing style. Every journal has its own voice, its own audience, its own focus.
Some are highly academic and very formal in their tone.
And others are more conversational and clinically focused.
One of the best ways is to, and I tell this to all my authors, to learn a journal style is simply to read it. Yes, try and read through about 3 recent issues of the journal cover to cover. This helps you understand not just the content, but the layout, how they use headings and subheads, tables and sidebars, chunks of information, and how the journal might use graphics.
That is great advice, Sherry, because editors can usually tell immediately whether an author is familiar with the journal.
So speaking of that, now let's talk about something every editor wants all authors to pay attention to, the author guidelines.
Please read them.
And read them again. So besides reading 3 recent issues of the journal, along with that, read those author guidelines at least twice.
We know they can be long, sometimes very long.
But they're incredibly important, and they tell you exactly what the journal expects. And there's a lot of tips in many author guidelines as well.
Yeah, you're going to learn about very specific things like article length, formatting, reference style, required sections, tables and figures, disclosures, and submission requirements.
And following the guidelines signals professionalism. You as a nurse writer are paying attention to the author guidelines. Remember, the editor can really immediately tell if you have read and followed the author guidelines.
Yes, the editor will notice when authors haven't reviewed them.
In fact, one of the quickest ways for a submission to get delayed or even rejected is failing to follow the author guidelines. So just a quick example, our maximum word count is near around 33,000. I'm sorry, 3,300 words. And if we get a manuscript in that's, maybe very much styled like a doctoral project, and it's at 20,000 words, we know that the author has not read the guidelines.
That's so true. So just think of the guidelines as a roadmap because they're there to help you succeed.
And another helpful strategy when getting started is narrowing your topic focus.
Oh, so true. Often, many new authors try to cover too much in one article.
Yes, and I think that's a common error that or a pitfall that many authors fall into. So, for example, instead of writing about leadership, that's a great big topic, of course, leadership. We can't cover everything in leadership in an article. We recently published a piece that covered nurse leaders doing patient rounds and really engaging with patients and looking at them at eye level and the value of that experience.
Yeah, so instead of patient education as a topic, maybe focus on one teaching strategy that can improve outcomes.
And the more focused your topic, the easier it usually is to get your article organized.
And focused articles are often more helpful to readers because they offer clear takeaways for nurses to apply in practice.
That's true. Before writing a full manuscript, some journals, and we at American Nurse Journal encourage this, we encourage authors to send us an author query letter.
We're actually going to dedicate a future episode entirely to queries, but here's what you need to know for now.
So an author query is basically a short message to an editor describing your proposed article idea.
So it helps determine whether your topic might be a good fit for the journal before you spend time writing the entire manuscript.
And like a focused article, a good query letter is brief and it's very focused.
So it will include things like who the audience is, why the topic matters, and a short outline of what the article would cover.
Yes, it's short and sweet. The goal isn't to send the entire paper.
No, it's simply to introduce the idea clearly and professionally.
So before we start to wrap up, I'd like to remind all of our listeners that we have a link on our webpage at My American Nurse, Write, Submit, Succeed, where you can submit your questions to us to address in future episodes. We've received a question from a nurse, Laura Earhart, an RN working in school nursing in Elgin, Illinois. Laura wants to write a recommendation for a fellow registered nurse who does school nursing. She asked, could you give me some tips or pointers on how to write a good one? Julie, you did a great response to this, and I'd really like if you could share your ideas.
Yeah, that was so great. Thank you for your question, Laura. It's a great question. I did let Laura know that I think her friend was very fortunate to have someone who's willing to put in the time to write a quality recommendation. When I write a recommendation for a colleague, I like to touch on at least 4 topics, 2 of which I always include. For the rest, I just kind of choose them. But here are where I focus. So the things I always include would be their clinical competence and communication skills. Other topics that you might touch on include like compassion or professionalism, ability to work independently, advocacy for patients and families, collaboration with staff or community providers, and even leadership, organization, or crisis management if it's applicable. But I did tell her that my biggest advice is write about what you have personally witnessed. Specific examples make recommendations meaningful.
That's great, Jules. Thanks for sharing that. So finally, we want to tell you about some writing resources that we have on our webpage. You don't have to figure this out all on your own.
No, we've gathered writing resources on our webpage to help you get started.
These resources include tips for beginner authors, writing guidance, tools to help you move from idea to manuscript.
Because sometimes the hardest part for many nurses isn't having something valuable to say.
It's believing that you're qualified to say it.
Yeah. But nursing needs more voices, more practical insights, more nurses willing to share what they've learned.
We hope you'll consider getting started on your writing project soon. Thanks for joining us for episode 2 of Write, Submit, Succeed, a Nurses Podcast.
In our next episode, we'll take a deeper dive into overcoming common barriers. We'll discuss imposter syndrome, time constraints, lack of confidence.
Until then, start small, but get started.
And take that first step.
And remember, your voice
Your
matters.
voice matters.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks.